and welcome back to your Product North Star podcast. Today, I'm joined by someone who's become, I believe, a really good friend. I hope he agrees, Nick Charalambous of Few and Far. Nick, thanks so much for joining us today.
No problem at all. Definitely a good friend.
Oh, awesome. Cool. That could have gone either way. Yeah. So, Nick, if you wouldn't mind giving the audience just a quick little bit of a brief background. And for people listening, Nick and I have spoken so many times, and just to give you one or two kind of minutes of intro of why I wanted to speak to Nick. Nick is one of the only people in product recruitment, and I'm sure, he does a lot more and he can tell a little bit more about that. But Nick has been one of the only product recruiters who's ever said to me, "Hey, Ross, what's your plan for the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? What's your plan for your career? What are you planning on doing it?" And it just, in an industry that shouldn't be unusual, it really struck me as a really unique thing. And as I've gotten to know Nick over time, he's one of the few great product recruiters who's got his heart in the right place. He understands the industry and he understands what us in products are going through to a large extent. But what I'm really hoping to get from Nick today, as we get to know him, is what's it like on the other side of the table, right? What is he, he hears us as products saying time and time again, like we might say things like, "Hey, I love this framework. I love that framework." What should we be saying? What is it that, hiring managers really want to hear? And so Nick, if you wouldn't mind giving us a bit of a couple of minutes, just a bit of background just about your experience in products and product recruiting, and maybe just in recruiting in general.
Yeah, so I've been doing product recruitment now since mid 2009, so quite a long time. I started off doing it actually in the publishing industry during a financial crash, just to make it even harder. I remember my conversations at that point when people would ask me, what is product? I had to kind of give real detailed explanations of what product looked like. And things have changed now. It's become more formalized, which is great. But it still varies. So I've kind of, had my whole career really in the product recruitment space. And 8 years ago, started Few and Far. And to give you a quick background, Few and Far focuses on helping businesses build their product, engineering, design, and data teams. There's three different ways that we do that. One is like an advisory matching service. The other one is an exec search, but only across those four verticals. And the final one is the team growth, where we work with businesses to hire anything from 1 to 15 different roles at the same time. But for us, what was really important is building really in-depth knowledge about the skill sets that we focus on as opposed to the industry, because in a digital age, the industry is almost irrelevant. So yeah, we've been going for around 8 years. I think we're at 38 people at the moment, which is great. And yeah, it's probably the busiest market that really I've ever seen, which is a nice change to 2020.
Yes, 2020 and 21 were pretty dire, weren't they? I think everybody was waiting for the market to come back, and then it was like, "Oh, we got it locked down. It's back. It's in. It's out." How did you guys get through that time?
2020 was hard. We were doing really, really well in 2019. We had our biggest year, and the first quarter of 2020 was fantastic. And then the pandemic hit, which was okay actually for the first kind of month or 2 months. People were kind of just continuing with the processes, but then I think it was around May, 75% of our pipeline dropped off pretty much overnight, which was terrifying considering we were at 25 or 26 people. We'd spent all this time building this business. It was genuinely scary. But what was really great is the team really pulled together. We dug down, we figured out how to work remotely, which is weird generally in sales because we've never done that. And at the end of the year, at the end of 2020, we didn't make really kind of any profit, a very, very small amount of profit, which was a hit. But what was great for us was that we redefined the whole service offering. We had built really solid foundations in terms of how we were going to move forward and how we were going to grow. And, what was amazing was that, like I said, the team really came together. We had quite a few people on furlough. Everyone came back. We didn't make any redundancies, which was great. And then, we started off 2021 in really good form, and we ended up having our biggest ever year. Secured a new office, which was great. And we've gone to I think we're now about 90% of our work is retained, as opposed to the beginning of 2021, which was about 5%. So it's been a really good year, and I've said it before, but the market was absolutely crazy at the moment, which is good.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, what I want to talk about a little bit, is us in products are kind of jaded on the other side, right? Mm. So it's been great hearing about the challenges that you've been through the last couple of years, especially, moving on to, let's say, more of a retainer model. Mm. Us in product, and I see loads of people, friends of mine, kind of saying, hey, we're in product, we get approached by recruiters every day. And I kind of want to explain to them, like, listen, you're not some kind of magical unicorn. There's some search criteria. If you say senior product manager there, within a few things. And I'm not saying that recruiters are just kind of like spray and pray and they just hope that anybody gets back. But, I'd love to hear it from the other side of the table. What do you, in recruiting, specifically in product, what do you think we as product managers kind of get wrong, or we could really improve when it came to our, whether it's our online persona on, usually, I guess, on LinkedIn and other places? What can we learn from you, dude?
I don't think there's anything in particular that people are getting wrong, because if your friends are saying that they're being approached pretty much every day by recruiters, I believe it. Right, there is a huge amount of roles out there, and a lot of the time you have to use keywords, right, to find the right people. The problem is product or sourcing the right product people doesn't necessarily work effectively just by using keywords. You need to really understand the whole context. So, everything from actually what's the type of product that individual is working on, what's the impact they had, what are the resources they have available to them, what funding stage is the company in, who do they report to? Like, all these different things come into consideration when you're looking at someone as a fit for the next role, right, or for the role that I'm recruiting. So, a lot of people, to be, I guess, efficient, will just create a list and send a whole load of messages and hope some relevant people come back. But in terms of things that would, if you want to be more proactive with, your career, there's a few things that I think product people don't do well enough. One is, I guess, when you introduce me, that question of where does my career go? Right. What do I see myself doing in 10 years time, even 15 years time, right? I don't think anyone's going to be retiring anytime soon. That's kind of just starting their journey off in product. So having an understanding of where that career can go is really important, because you have to then work backwards. It's kind of like when you're building a product, right? You have an idea of what you want to try and achieve, and then you kind of build, smaller sprints or, a plan to move towards that. When I speak to product people, they don't really do that themselves. So that's one thing. The second thing is making it clear to anyone that clicks on, like, your LinkedIn profile, the things that are highlighted, right? What product are you working on? How many people are you looking after? Or, how many products are you looking after? Have you got kind of experience working with engineers and designers? Like, all the things you might think, oh, these are very basic things. I'm obviously going to be doing those because I'm a product manager. Not everyone that looks at your profile is going to be a product person. If a founder is in a Series A startup, they've just raised a load of money, they're looking maybe for their head of product, they might be doing that search themselves, and actually they might not know a huge amount about it. So having the right kind of key things on your profile is really important. The final thing is the achievements. Clear, tangible commercial achievements, having those really clear on your profile make a massive difference as well. They're the things that grab the reader. So it's almost taking a sales approach to it, right? It's a blend of sales and, I guess, user experience. If someone's landing in your profile, you need to be able to tell them what you do in the most concise way, and you need to show them what you have done as quickly as possible. So, yeah, I'd say they're probably the three key things just on in terms of profile that I'd suggest.
That's really interesting as far as what we could do, I guess, with our LinkedIn profile. What about posting content? Like, do recruiters look at the content we post? Is it relevant to them? I know you guys, or at least a lot of people have the perception that recruiters spend the better part of their lives in LinkedIn, but is it worth posting content? Do recruiters care? Do hiring managers care?
I think a lot of people do care about it. Especially from, if we compare when I first started, doing recruitment, events and communities, we were very, very early. Mind the Product as an example, they've just been acquired by Pendo, which is amazing for them. And I started going to those events probably like 2011, something like that, when it was like 10 or 15 people in a pub. So at that point, the community side and the content side really wasn't as important, but that's really changed now. People are building their personal brands. And I don't think it makes a massive, difference to getting a job, but it makes you far more visible. And it does give you, put it this way, if you're an early stage startup and you're looking for your head of product director, having someone who's got a pretty good personal brand that potentially can attract good people to the business, elevate your brand in that community, is obviously going to be valuable. I think the perception of it has changed. I do think it is important to kind of get yourself out there, but it obviously depends on how much time you can dedicate to it, right? It's less about the frequency of the content and more about the quality of it.
Sure. And look, you also touched on something really interesting just now, which I think goes to the heart of it, or at least the heart of what I see. Moving away from LinkedIn for a couple of minutes. You mentioned, what is our plan as a product manager, right? The different tracks that you've seen, I think. I'd love for you to talk to us a little bit about the different tracks, and one of the things is, there's maybe an expectation, maybe an assumption. I'm not trying to find the right word here, but maybe there's an assumption that you want to be a PM, then a senior, then a head of, then a director or VP or whatever it is, right? And I've done pretty much most of those roles. And sometimes I just like kind of going in there for 6 months and, let's say, picking up a contract and just, I'm going to deliver this for 6 months. And that's exactly what I'm doing. But that's strategic, maybe because I've, maybe have other interests. But what would you advise product managers where they're looking at their career? Let's say they're senior product manager, right? Let's just assume that a product manager, they've been there for a couple of years, they've now risen to senior PM. What would your advice be, and tell us a little bit about the different tracks that you see them going down.
Okay. So I always use this framework when I'm talking to people, and I think I probably spoke to you about it as well, right? So there's generally 3 routes that can outline the direction of a career. And this doesn't specifically go just around product, right? This can go across a number of different areas. The first one is the entrepreneurial route. And I speak to a lot of people that have a huge passion for building their own business at some point and scaling that. They might not necessarily know exactly what it is, but that's something they definitely want to do. So that's the first route. And obviously that has some pros, but it also has some cons, and it does affect everything from like your work-life balance to the lifestyle that you lead. So all of these different things need to be taken into consideration. The second one is the career growth route, right? So like you talked about, if someone's a senior PM, you can go to a head of, you can go to director, you can go to CPO. The other great thing about product is actually there are, so many other areas or other avenues you can go down. Once you reach that leadership level, I've seen CPOs move into COO positions. I've seen CPOs go into large transformation programs and take chief digital officer seats. But if you look at the US as well, if you look at the big tech companies, a lot of the CEOs that are in those seats have come from product. And I think it's slightly different, obviously, in the US. Product is a little bit more advanced over there, and it's more recognized as a long-term career track. So I think we will move to that direction, but it does mean that people have got a lot of options when they go down the career route. The third one is becoming more and more prevalent, especially in the last 2 to 5 years. I've called it the portfolio route. And that generally comes up when you get to a certain level in terms of leadership and you want to make a jump across to maybe more of an advisory gig where you work with anything from 2 to 15 different types of businesses at the same time, anything from 1 day a quarter to a couple of days a week. And you can change it up. You can work on things you're really passionate about. You can work with startups. You can work with large businesses. But that route is also attractive because you can focus on your own side gigs. You can do training. You can do lecturing. And if you don't want to work, this is the thing, you can scale it down and actually say, do you know what? I want to spend, 3 months traveling Europe and I don't want to do any work, and you can do that. Or you can go into like a bit of intense mode and fill up every day under the sun. Each of those ones has a very different kind of effect on your lifestyle and does change your day to day. Like if you talk about the portfolio one, that's a big sales. There's a big sales element to that because you need to make sure that you're consistently feeding the pipeline. But they're the three kind of overviews. I think what kind of going more into your question around like for a product person, what does that track look like? What can it look like? You can absolutely progress, right? And I think a big part of progressing, from a senior PM to a head of, one of the key things is about having some management experience, like direct line management experience, having, a couple of people maybe you looked after that have grown under you. The other key thing is what I mentioned right at the beginning, right, is having clear, tangible, commercial impact on a business. But again, you could always, I've spoken to people that decide to go down the IC route, right? They don't want the hassle of management. They don't really fancy that. They quite like getting their head down, going deep into problems and coming up with products and working more in a collaborative way rather than having a team, and they want to remain close to product. That's also fine. But unless you take the time to step back and think about what you enjoy and what works for your life, then you can very easily fall into one of these tracks by accident and actually find it hard to then, transition over.
So that's really interesting. On the portfolio route, would that be something like picking up multiple contracts simultaneously? Would it be, in other words, Monday is that client, Tuesday is that client? And would it be working with a recruiter like you guys to find those contracts, or would it be just, hey, let's go out and sell? What's your thinking? I just think that a lot of the listeners might not have been exposed to that as a track at the moment.
So you're right. It like you could absolutely go and pick up contracts where you're doing kind of 1 or 2 days a week with different companies. The risk with that is if you're doing it at a level where, maybe you haven't reached like a high level position, it will be harder because there are specific things that, companies will use senior level product advisors for, everything from strategy to setting up teams, creating processes from scratch, hiring, even pitching or working with the companies to get their pitch ready for funding. And there's a whole range of other things as well. But if you're at like a senior PM level, let's say, you would probably find it hard to find those part-time contracts. There's not many of them out there. So it's something you can absolutely attempt, but the problem with that as well, you might not necessarily always get the learning opportunities that you would get if you're permanently employed, right? So if I was in a position where I'd, maybe had 5 or 6 or 7 years in product, I would think about mastery before I go into the portfolio route. So, focusing on really developing my skills in all of the areas that a target client on the portfolio side would find useful. So I would focus on that. But if you want to do some of that, the great thing about the portfolio is you can actually blend that really well with a normal permanent role. If you've got some flexibility with your line manager, for example, you could say, okay, do you mind if I do, 2 hours of advisory work with very early stage startups and kind of, transition into that role that way. And if it's something you want to do full time, then you can kind of start to set up these plans and these conversations with your current business to move you forward. But from the advisors that I've seen do very well in the space, generally all of them have been at kind of C-level or like, VP before in a permanent role before they move over to portfolio. I guess, if you're a great IC, why would a company hire you 1 or 2 days a week when they could probably just hire someone permanently or hire a contractor that's going to be there 5 days a week? So it's much harder to make that transition full time.
It's interesting. I mean, I've done roles where I've gone in as VP product at, let's say, 2.5 days a week or 2 days a week. Specifically when there's specific problems to solve, like we're an agency that needs to transition to become a product-led business because we've developed products internally. How do we move from being an agency, which is just kind of, let's say project-led? So I've seen that specifically, at least with some of the work that I've done. And stuff that I've done more, let's say in the States, they seem, I don't know whether I should generalize by doing that, but I've also, and then to talk to your other point, like when I started the podcast, I was contracting and I was like, hey, I love talking to people like you. Here's something that I can do. And then the podcast just really started taking off. Although it was kind of created to try and teach me various other things, like talking to people like Jeff Gottoff and Teresa Torres and Roman Pisher and great people like that. But it was also, hang on a second, there's a lot of access and things that I was learning as I was improving my product career. So, I guess that was one of the things I guess maybe I should put in my portfolio if I think about my career as a portfolio. And you also mentioned something about like permanence and contracts, right? So do you, I mean, in the market right now, are you seeing like, do people find it hard to go back to permanent after being contractors and vice versa? Do you find like it's a certain personality type, or they just want to say, hey, I like the freedom of contracting, or I like certain things? How are you seeing the market at the moment, and has it changed in the last few years?
Product is one of those skill sets where contract isn't as common. If you compare it to like engineering, for example, massively common, and certain languages within engineering are predominantly contract at the moment. Product has always been one of those ones that's kind of, I would say, between 75 and 80% perm, simply because of the fact that to have a real impact in a business, you generally need to be there as a real minimum 6 months, probably closer to a year. And a lot of companies are just more willing to hire someone on a permanent basis. Where I've seen actually quite a big increase recently in terms of contract is just, I think it's more down to the lack of available strong product managers on a permanent basis, and companies need to plug the gap somehow. So, what happens is they'll bring the contractor in, they'll probably try and continue to hire on a permanent basis as well. But contract in product has become more and more common as time is going on. But I think I don't think it will reach the point where it's going to be 100, or close to an engineering standpoint, like 80 or 90% contract. On your other point, regarding people jumping back into perm after they've been contract, I think people that have been contract for kind of 3 to 5 years, in let's say 6 months or shorter contracts, will find it more difficult to get into an interview stage for a permanent role, simply because that kind of creates some red flags in the client's mind. Oh, they're going, they want to come to perm because maybe there's no contracts, and as soon as there's a contract, they'll jump out again. I think IR35 has also had a big impact on how people in the contract space feel about perm. You don't find as many contracts now with IR35 coming into place. The tax benefits aren't always there, so more people are just saying, you know what, it's just easier and less hassle if I go perm. That's been a big trend as well. But I once that kind of settles down, I do see contract becoming more and more common, especially because there are more companies in Europe as well now that are using remote working, and London and as well as the UK has got a very, very good reputation for product in Europe. So it tends to be, I guess, the hunting ground for a lot of those European companies.
What about people who aren't in Europe who want to get, say, contract roles or perm roles, like, and work remotely? Have you seen? Listen, I'm South African, so I speak to a number of South Africans who are like, "Hey, listen, we're on the same time zone. It'd be great to get a contract in the UK, and I can kind of work here from the beach in Cape Town." Although maybe that says probably more about me than other people. But do you see that at all in the industry?
Yeah, do you know what? We're starting to see it more and more. I mean, look, remote working hasn't really been the norm for a while. Product is also one of those skill sets I'm finding even when we're hiring on a permanent basis, people want someone in the office if they're a product person, at least a week a month, or, if they can do 1 day a week, something like that, just because it's such an integral role that relies on collaboration across multiple teams. Getting that face time is quite important. But yeah, I mean, we've worked with companies and we've put contractors into businesses that are based in the UK who, and the contractors live outside of the EU. It is trickier to do from a paperwork perspective, but it can and has been done.
Oh, that's interesting. So, okay, maybe that's something I should think about on cold winter days here in London, but who knows? So, okay, so the other thing that you and I have spoken at length about is, and I feel very passionate about it. So a lot of people might not know, but I got into product partly from having a background at IBM. After having been an actual engineer at Lotus, I became a sales engineer. So I was a technical pre-sales engineer where everything was about hitting targets and learning. Solution selling was the big IBM thing back in the day. And I loved it to an extent. It was really great getting out there, talking to people. It was always a sales engineer. We partnered with a BDM, a business development manager. And what we used to say internally was the BDM takes the CTO or CRO out and plays golf, and we end up actually staying and selling to the team leads or the people who actually have to do the work, right? And I'm sure the BDMs would hate it if I said that, but hey, we all had our own roles. And one of the things that I see product people doing is really holding back from when they're doing their discovery and they're talking to customers and like, do you like this feature? Do you like this product? We're trying to evaluate it. They kind of hold back before that part of, but would you buy it? And would you buy would you spend £1,000 on it per year, whatever it is? And awesome. And then would you be willing to, could they pre-sell it? Would you be willing to pre-buy it and say, would you be willing to give a commitment of 10%, almost like a deposit? And you know what, if we don't build it, obviously there's no commitment. But really what we're trying to do is get people to really, instead of saying they're interested, getting them to really kind of pre-commit. So it's not just, hey, would you like this new feature? There's no skin in the game, if you will, to say no, or yes, or anything really. But if you go, oh, cool, you really like it. Awesome. It's £1,000. How about £100? And that guarantees you, and you know what, if you are buy it, we'll give you 30% or for grandfather you, or for whatever the deal is. Like I've hardly ever had conversations with product people where they're really trying to go out there and go, okay, cool, we need to sell it. It's more like, hey, our customers say they really like it. They really like the feature. Would they buy it? They said they would. And it's like, awesome. Everyone's excited. And then I'd be there kind of going, yeah, they're all excited, but they haven't said anything that, like, if you asked me, hey, do I like hiking? Yes, cool. Would you like to? Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be £200. Oh, wait, no, hang on a second. No, I don't like it so much. And what do you think, Nick? I think salespeople and I view people in recruitment spend so much time getting to know people. And I think great recruiters to an extent are kind of like great product people. And insofar as they really have a lot of empathy, they take time, they listen. I'd love to get your view on this.
Very interesting question. So I think, by the way, I think this differs quite a lot from consumer-facing product people to B2B product people. I also think it differs from product people in large enterprise businesses, for example, versus product people in a new SaaS startup. And I think there's a there's a balance, right? So if you're a product person, and you're, doing new product development, you're going through that discovery phase. I tend to find that people that have worked in earlier stage businesses or startups have much more of that commercial focus. But I don't think it should just be focused on them. I think it's a valuable skill set in any capacity. And actually, weirdly enough, I was doing sales training this week with our new marketing exec because, I want her to be using the sales mentality when it comes to her content. I want her to go through that process. Okay, what is the goal? We want to generate more candidates coming to us directly, as an example. Okay, great. Who's the audience? Candidates. Let's be more specific. Who in particular? What kind of candidates we hope to target? And then off the back of that, figuring out, okay, what are the needs of these individuals in general around maybe a specific topic? And then the way I positioned it was like, well, your pitch is your copy. And I think if product people, great product people that I've seen have been able to get real down into like the detail of, the data and what's happening on this specific product. Or, if it's a brand new product, really, really being able to go deep into the motivations and the needs of their customer base, right? Understanding that inside and out. They're then able to really bring their level of thinking all the way up to the top, where you're looking at the whole market and you're considering, okay, what are all the options, almost that kind of jobs to be done approach. And they're able to then create a product. I think what you mentioned there, which is really interesting, is that extra step to I've completely forgotten the word now, but to almost like verify
like discovery type of.
No, there's another word for it, and it's a product term, and I'm really annoyed that I've forgotten it. But there's the way to almost like authenticate that this is a good idea, and there's a level of like, what would you call them? Maybe ego metrics, which is like, yes, this is a great product, and yes, the design is great, and yes, this is easy to use. But actually, what you really care about, and probably what the business cares about, is okay, would someone spend, like you said, £1,000 on this, or would they spend, £5 a month to sign up to this, and how long until they churn, and like all these different things then come into consideration.
Absolutely, and I was talking to a chief product officer who was the CPO of a really large organization. And he said one of the things that he wanted people to do was actually get his product people to go out on calls with salespeople and let them hear how the customers, even if they're just listening in on on a gong call or whatever it is, and they're listening in, hear how the salespeople talk to the customers about it and hear how the customers respond. Because a lot of the time what product people might get is they might get, well, let's look at the tickets that come through in Jira or our support ticketing system, whatever it is. And they'll realize, hey, this is what the customers think. And this is what the customers are telling us. But it's also really, really interesting to try and get a salesperson and listen and do that. And I feel like in my product career, I feel like that really started taking off when I started building a lot more rapport with the sales teams, with the corporate sales team, SMB sales team. This was in an enterprise B2B2C product, and the sales teams really focus on the B2B components of that. So we did have apps that are B2C and then the B2B side. But as soon as I was able to build rapport and actually get them to do that. And in addition, what I would do is when I give presentations to the stakeholders, especially with the salespeople, what I learned from a sales manager is he used to kind of give put a form and ask questions. It was kind of a comprehension form, but it really was, hey, we spoke about this. What did you think? Or let's say we spoke about our roadmap for the next quarter. What do you think about the roadmap for the next quarter? What do you like? What don't you like? And he got all his team to respond to that. And it was so interesting for me to actually realize, I might have been talking about this new feature or chatbots or something and say like, nobody cared. Nobody even responded. But if I said to them, hey, did you like what I said about chatbots? I said, oh yeah, it's great. But if you said to do that, which was great. And as soon as I did that, my I'd say my product management skills really started going to the next level as far as stakeholder management, and actually also realizing just because you've given a presentation, and I've seen so few companies do this, that like when a product manager gives a chat about a roadmap or gives a presentation to the company and says like, here's the direction, here's our vision, whatever. What did you guys think? Give me some feedback. And it's not like, oh, what do you think of me? You're almost irrelevant. It's how did your message land, right? You're talking about copywriting, or you were talking about, the blog posts and kind of being like, you're saying like your copy, your message, your posts are your kind of sales and getting out there. And even then you can say, hey, Ross, I'm not quite sure you're listening. Did you understand that? Right. Let's do that again. I guess that we're doing it now in real time, but I think that's an area that as product managers, they really, really could learn a lot. And I think you guys on the recruitment space, really understand that. And when you talk to product people, and let's say all things being equal, right? You've got someone who's been a senior PM for 3 to 5 years. They tick the basic boxes. Let's say they live in London and not Cape Town on the beach. They hear the budget's the same, 3 to 5 years of whatever. Maybe industry isn't that specific. Maybe it is. But what do you think really stands out when you're putting a candidate forward? I'm going back to the recruiting thing and products, but other candidates that you speak to and go, wow, this person's super articulate, or wow, this person's whatever. What really helps them stand out in their job search?
The base of a really good product person, I think, is quite similar to the base of a very good salesperson. Ultimately, from like a sales perspective, the key thing is being able to understand the need of that individual and the problem that they're facing, but also having the ability to ask questions to understand, like, how does this fit in with their, day to day, week to week, year to year? Like, how does this specific problem tie into everything else? And really great product people have that ability to understand that about their user. And if you can do that, then you're able to then build up and also potentially be quite creative with the way that you solve the problem, because you understand, I guess, the whole ecosystem that it's in. So I think from a product perspective, I think there are some really good and useful skills that product people can develop by kind of just learning some of the real basics and fundamentals of sales. And I think one of the key things about it as well is it really does help managing multiple stakeholders, right? Being able to have an ability to understand each one of the individual's needs and being able to position and influence in a way that means that you can get stuff done more effectively and people buy into your product and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think as a whole, I think sales is a very, very useful skill to have. That's going to really boost people's career and I guess the way that they develop their career in product.
I remember my career started really taking off when I started engaging more with salespeople. And I remember, presenting roadmaps, and I had this great the head of sales, who was also like really just a great coach and mentor. And he would kind of took me back to my earlier days as a pre-sales engineer. And one of the things that he did, which is great, is he got me, I don't know about the other product people. Whenever I gave a presentation, we'd give a form for feedback at the end. And I've never seen other people do it since then, but it's something that I've had with the people that I've coached and mentored in products. And I've asked them to kind of say, hey, here's a form, let's get feedback. In other words, what do our stakeholders really think about what I just said, right? Let's say it's a roadmap for the next quarter. I could say, hey, this is what we're doing, blah, blah, blah. But it's only if I send the form and going, hey, what about the roadmap do you really like? What about the roadmap don't you like? And actually getting the form. And where I've seen some people kind of miss this is they think it's about them. I'm not asking kind of, hey, what do you think about me? I'm asking, what do you think about my roadmap for my product? It's not, but I'm also very, very open to take criticism and to take feedback. So it could be things like, hey, what I thought we were talking about for the next quarter, let's say it's about our chatbot, and you start talking about how we're going to be adding upgrades to the website, then I know very, very quickly that what I was trying to communicate just didn't land, and I need to go back and do that again, right? So I think that's really, really interesting. And I think there's a lot that we can do as product people getting closer. And I had a chief product officer on a recent podcast, and that was one of the things that he said is, he wanted his product people to get out of the office, talk to salespeople, get there. And it's not just like listen to, because a lot of the time as product people, we look at support tickets, right? We look at, hey, in our support ticketing system, Jira, whatever it is, people said they want this or they don't like that. We think that's where we need to focus. What we don't do, I think, enough of is go out on sales calls with salespeople and say, hey, we've got this new feature coming out. What do you guys think? Or we're busy working on that, and really hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. But I want to do a bit of a U-turn, if you don't mind, just for a couple of minutes. And I'd love to just focus on, you see a lot of candidates that may be great, that might not be so great. The candidates that really stand out in product, whether it's a senior level, let's say SPM, senior product manager and above, what really stands out? Who are the candidates that are really nailing those interviews?
It's a really good question.
It's not so much who are they. It's kind of what are the traits and characteristics that you go, wow, if I had more of this would be great.
I think it's a mentality. I think it is really a mentality. I think, I've spoken to some amazing product people over the years, right? And when I get asked this question quite a bit, right? Not obviously from the team as well, right? And I really do think it's people that have got the ability to really understand user research is one of the key things. Like, really have that ability, kind of what we talked about before, right? Being able to really dig in and understand the problem, but also how that kind of fits in with the ecosystem. People that have got that real kind of curiosity about it. I think the other thing that's important is, some, like a decent level of technical understanding, because you can propose a solution, but you might not really know if it's technically viable. If you're a product person, you've got some level of, tech understanding, you can come up with slightly, more potentially creative ways, but also, you'll know if some of those ideas are actually functional, right? Can we actually build this? Is this going to be realistic? Is it going to be able to be built at a relatively decent cost? I think the other thing that's really interesting is if you've got all of those things, it's being able to go really high up from a strategy perspective and be able to see, okay, what does this whole ecosystem look like? What does this whole market look like? What are the other markets that are potentially be affecting this? What are the trends that are happening at the moment that are going to influence this specific problem? And so I think from a skill set perspective, I think those things, if you can do all of those things, you're going to be a really strong product person. But I think the other thing that you touched on there is like the way they communicate. Good product people that I've spoken to are able to engage people very, very quickly. And they can create a narrative around their product, around their career, building a very clear story, from this is when I joined, this is what the company looked like, this is what the situation was, this is what the problem was, these are the different things that we did. And you know what? Sometimes we messed up. And, when we messed up, we learned this. And this is how we changed it. And this is what we did, and blah, 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 blah. Someone that can tell that story in a way that can demonstrate their skills really effectively is just generally going to stand out. And if they can partner that with those clear, tangible outcomes, it makes a really big difference. And I think I make a conscious effort to not really be influenced by the brands that they work for, right? Which is a really big thing, right? So, if someone's been at a Meta or a Google or, something like that, generally recruiters won't even necessarily read the CV. They will just call them because they know they're probably going to be pretty good, right? You get a level of credibility from being in those businesses. But I think it's really important to understand, what's the challenge that company that you're interviewing for needs to solve. And companies will be at slightly different stages. They'll have a different 12 to 18-month roadmap. There'll be different pain points. And, in terms of interview, where I've seen product people really stand out is they take that user research kind of mentality and approach. They apply it to the person that they're talking to in that business, right? Tell me more about the challenges you're facing. Why are you hiring this role? What would success look like? And, from that, they can really gauge, okay, what are the right pieces of experience that I need to highlight in this conversation? And I think that, for me, tends to be where I've seen people really stand out. But, I mean, I guess you've kind of had a bit of experience in this space anyway as well, right? It'd be good to get your thoughts.
Yeah, whether it's people I've hired or people I've coached, I mean, I think the great product people I've worked with are those that want to learn and are curious and want to be coached, I should say. And also those who are willing to kind of practice. They're kind of like, let's look at our career as if it was a product, which is what I usually tell the people we coach is, if you look at your career as a product, like where are you and who are your customers? Because we all say, you've got two customers, the hiring manager and also the recruiters, and they've got different problems and they've got different jobs to be done. And you need to meet them where they are, not expect them to meet you where you are. And if you could kind of go, hey, Nick is trying to place this person, at least help Nick or his team or whichever recruiter you're working with, help them out by having your CV up to speed. Help them out by realizing, hey, listen, you're not a risk because you've got all these you've done all these things, you can communicate them effectively. So get your CV, get all your collateral, so to speak, ready, and know how to communicate a story effectively. If someone asks you a question, how did this happen? Be able to very quickly kind of go, this is the problem, this was the solution, this was the result. If they want more information, they'll ask you, right? But have those examples ready, and not waffle around, hey, well, I think this framework, that framework. Yeah, we've all read Marty Kagan's books, we've all read Roman Pichler's books, or whoever. We can all talk about that theoretically. But the people that I've seen coaching get roles and really increase and kind of escalate their career really quickly are able to do that. But that's in the interview, right? They're still got to get the job. And when they're in the job, it's the people who've got the empathy. They're able to get rapport really quickly. They're able to ask quite challenging questions in a way that doesn't make the person on the other side of the call feel like you've just kind of, I don't know, shot their dog or something, or stolen their favorite feature that they've wanted for, forever. And that's tough. And, sometimes, and people can be difficult. And I think the last thing I'd say is, there are so many great companies out there, and I've been blessed enough to work with some of them. I've also been unfortunate enough to work with some of those that are less than absolutely wonderful. And I'm sure that they were wonderful. They're probably just wonderful for other people, although I probably will always think they're crap. But it's like, hey, if you're not happy, reach out. Reach out to someone like Nick. Speak to him or his team. And, if you're unhappy, talk to someone, right? And a lot of people I speak to, they're kind of, I've got to show that I've been at this company for 2 years. I'm like, maybe you do. Maybe you think you do. But and maybe you're right. And let's, get some kind of objectivity there, right? Let's speak to someone in the industry and go, hey, Nick, I've only been here 6 months. I hate it. It sucks. What do you think? I spoke to someone we were coaching the other day. He's landed an amazing job after months at this huge brand and amazing. And then he was like, oh my God, I hate it. Like, this is terrible. And I was like, well, you got to make a choice. Like, do you want to show that you've been there for 18 months or 2 years, whatever, at the brand? Because if you do that and you suck it up, it'll probably open huge amounts of doors in the future. Or if it really isn't for you, you just got to move on, dude. Just pick it up and move on. And that's it. So, Nick, I've been looking forward to doing this podcast for you for months. I'm so glad we finally got to do it. I want to be respectful of your time and your team's time, who clearly that they want you. So let's be respectful of that. And Nick, if people want to reach out to you or your team, where can they find out more about you guys?
Yeah, you can contact any of the team on LinkedIn. Our website is fewandfar.io. So reach out to us there, and if you can just drop me a message directly on LinkedIn, you can. Actually, going directly to the point that you just highlighted, right? You shouldn't necessarily just think about recruiters when you're actively looking. Feel free to reach out to anyone here. We're not going to be forcing you into a role. I've had multiple conversations with people where it's like, hey, I'm not ready to look yet, maybe in the next 6 to 9 months, but I'm trying to figure out what does that next step look like, what are the key things I should be keeping an eye on. And, if someone is unhappy in their role and, they want to consider what's out there, they can do that without any commitment as such, right? So yeah, the best way to contact me is LinkedIn, probably the easiest way. Otherwise, I get quite a few emails, so it takes a bit of time to come back to people.
Brilliant, Nick. Thanks so much. And for everybody watching and listening, we're going to put some links to Nick and his team in the show notes. And Nick, again, thanks so much for joining us today. I hope you get to do this in the future, and best of luck in growing your business. I know you guys are going to do brilliantly. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Pleasure, dude. Thank you very much for having me. And good luck with the podcast. Seems to be growing.
Thanks, mate. And for everybody watching, bye for me and bye from Nick. Bye for now.